Hello, everybody, and welcome along to the Liverpool Echoes Blood Red podcast. After a week-long absence, we are back. I'm your host for today, Patrick Smith, and we've got a lot to catch up on a weekend when Jesus was dead and buried but had a miraculous recovery on Sunday. Let's all pray that Liverpool's top four hopes can face a similar scenario when they take on Arsenal at Anfield on Sunday, after a disappointing return from the international break has pushed Champions League football further away. Well, joining me on the pod today, we have an Easter excellent panel to react to the past 7 days and preview the weekend. Up first is the Liverpool Echoes LFC correspondent Paul Gorst. Gorsty, how's your week been?
Yeah, not bad. Not bad. Since I let you that shoe on to get those links in. You have to give me that back. Yeah, it's been another busy week. A couple of games that we're going to get stuck into, and obviously another big one on the horizon. Jürgen Klopp called it the season-defining week, didn't he? Last week, was it? Just before the City game, and 1 point from 6 so far probably does actually define how Liverpool's season has gone. So, yeah, we go again. A big one on Easter Sunday.
Yeah, the season-defining week hasn't quite been the rallying call I think we all hoped it would have been with, as you say, 1 point from 6 so far. Not ideal at all, is it? We've also got Liverpool FC writer Theo Squires alongside us. Theo, we thought you'd escaped the reaction to City and Chelsea, didn't you? So I bet you're delighted to be with us on the pod today.
Yeah, I've been off for the start of the week, so I was thinking I'd avoid all this misery, but here you are bringing it up again, just on the eve of the holidays. Hopefully, we're a little bit more positive on Easter Monday if we're doing one then for Arsenal reaction. But yeah, the season-defining week hasn't lived up to expectations. As Gorsty said, it's just summed up the season. Liverpool need to find form quickly. But if you want a positive omen, it was this stage of the season in 2020-21, after 28 games, exact same number of points, exact same league position. We know they went on a 10-game unbeaten run, finished third. Fingers crossed for a repeat this season.
Yeah, hopefully. So also loving the new headset, Theo, something out of the Big Jet TV, isn't it? Command control.
Well, you moan about my headphones every week, so I need to go for one that actually works so you can hear me properly for some strange reason. I quite like being quiet and no one hearing me.
Yeah, well, for podcast listeners, if I can describe Theo's headphones, it looks like something from the Apollo 11 mission. That's what I'll call that one as. But anyway, rounding off our panel is none other than women's football expert and Liverpool home and away, Beth Lindop. Beth, I'm sure you're longing for a return to Anfield after some bitterly disappointing away results over the past month.
Oh yeah, I can't wait. I mean, I'm not looking quite as high tech as Theo today, but yeah, it's been a rough week, hasn't it? So hopefully they can turn it around and produce a bit of a miracle on Easter Sunday.
Oh, there we go. I was waiting for someone to join me on the links. Love to see it. Well, should we get stuck in then, Gorsty? We'll start with you. We were unable to record the Blood Red pod at the start of the week, as we've mentioned at the top of the show, so we haven't had a chance to react to the Man City defeat. I mean, it's something I was hopefully personally wishing to brush over, but you're a far more honourable journalist than myself, so let's go over it. We've had almost a week since, obviously, the quite humbling experience from City. Have you got any further thoughts on that one?
No, I mean, like you say, Pat, we didn't record the podcast on Monday for whatever reasons, but we can't just ignore it, can we? We can't just, people would have been expecting us to react to that Manchester City defeat, and sadly, we can't just gloss over it. So, I mean, it was a decent first half, wasn't it? Liverpool, confident. A Liverpool team low on confidence did fairly well, and then it all just crumbled after the break. Yeah, I think that the most alarming thing for me now within this Liverpool team is just how badly they react to any sort of setback. We've seen this season when things go their way and they get a fair win, how they can still be devastating. We see against Manchester United, obviously against Bournemouth earlier in the season, and at Rangers. When things start to click and they get paired and they look every inch a top European side that they have been for much of the last 5 years, but now, when they get a little bit of a setback or an unexpected turn, whether it's a player goes off injured or a decision goes against them or they can see the goal, they just absolutely crumble. And you cannot do that at Manchester City. And City, like hyenas, weren't they, in the second half? I think they made it 2-1 after 53 seconds or something into the second half, and then it was 3-1 before 53 minutes, and then obviously Jack Grealish rounds it off. And in fairness, City kind of declared they could have easily have inflicted more misery on Liverpool than they could have ended up being on the end of a 5 or a 6. So they just don't seem to have that kind of ability to respond these days to any setback, and they sort of feel sorry for themselves rather than getting a little bit frustrated and a bit angry and a little bit of rage and a little bit of fire in the belly. that's just totally gone out of them this season, which is why looking at the longer term pitching out for the next 10 games, it's a little bit of a worry when you think Liverpool need to pick up, however many you think Liverpool need to get from the next 30 points available. Are they going to be able to do it if they're not able to respond to any kind of thing that goes against them? Because it's not going to be plain sailing for the next 10 games. Even if they were absolutely flying, you'd still think one or two things might, a few roadblocks in the path, and that has to be a major worry now for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, the last pod I did, I don't know if you were on at Gorst as well, it was with Ian Doyle, and he was saying that, Liverpool need 26 from 36 points available, he reckons, and, they've already dropped 5 of those points. I mean, it really doesn't leave that many left, as it's quite a dire position. I mean, Theo, what's your take on it? I mean, as Gorsty mentions there, Liverpool did sort of collapse well and truly at the start of the second half, but in the first half of the City match, they just seemed so fatigued, didn't they? I mean, it looked like a Champions League second leg, second half, really, the performance from Liverpool. They were really clinging on at times, weren't they, right from the off there?
Yeah, it was a really end-to-end game in that first half. Like Liverpool, they did look good on the counter-attack. They created chances on the counter-attack, and that's how they got their goal. But defensively, there were gaps emerging. The midfield wasn't really on top of the game, and City were passing it around with ease, and they looked in control. It was just when Liverpool were able to counter-attack, you felt they had a chance. But then it's the similarities to that Real Madrid game at Anfield, where there's a goal within seconds of the restart, and Liverpool just crumble. I suppose it's a slight difference from when they concede in the first minute of games and they crumble there, but it's still not a trait you want to see in your side. And as Gorsty said, just they don't react well to adversity at the moment. Like we were talking at the Etihad, saying, well, Virgil van Dijk's had a good first half, Diogo Jota's had a good first half, but then they just didn't come back out for the second half, did they? It just went from bad to worse for Liverpool. Like Trent Alexander-Arnold, he's a player who'll come under plenty of scrutiny. I thought he did okay at times up against Jack Grealish, and it's one where you can make excuses for some of the things that happened for the goals. Like the first goal, he's a bit too central, but you ask him, why are the centre-backs so far forward that he has to be central? Where are the midfielders covering so they can actually mark Jack Grealish at that far post? And then the second one, well, yes, he's miles too far up the pitch. That's dragged over a centre-back. That's dragged over a midfielder. And then there's just that massive gap in the middle. Robertson dives in. But then you're just finding it harder to make excuses for him. Like the fourth goal, for example, he just stops trying, doesn't he? They pass it around, they're in behind, and he just watches as Jack Grealish grabs one of the easiest goals of his career. The third one, it's a bit lucky. Like he gets the block in, it's instinctive, and it just happens to fall to a City player in the 6-yard box. But if you want to be critical, you can point fingers at Trent for all 4 goals here. Then he's not alone. Like you're not surprised he was dropped for the Chelsea game, but that whole of back 4, it wasn't a great performance, which seems quite strange saying when Virgil van Dijk had a really good first half. But yeah, Liverpool, they need their players to collectively stand up together and make a point of we're better than this. But as you said, they look tired, they look fatigued. It hasn't helped with the injuries because they haven't been able to rotate it. But then when we see all the changes in midweek, well, they maybe worked a bit harder. They weren't exactly any better on quality, and it was just through lack of finishing from Chelsea that they didn't find themselves losing 2 or 3-0.
Yeah, I mean, that's the main takeaway for me. It's such a lethargic performance, and as you rightly said, they were good on the counter-attack. They looked sharp at times. But, in the first half, if your only chances are being made by purely counter-attacking, you can't actually create any other form of chances. It's quite worrying, I think, isn't it? I mean, but then the flip side of that, I suppose, Beth, if we're going for the glass half full approach, City were very, very good, and they make it difficult, obviously, to make chances against them. And, as much as Trent could come under criticism, Jack Grealish probably had one of the best games of his entire career. That'll, it'll definitely go down as one of those. Do you think City were just brilliant, or do you think Liverpool were very poor and that's why they made it so easy for them?
I think it was just a combination of both. It wasn't necessarily the result that was a surprise. There's better Liverpool sides that have gone to the Etihad and struggled. And, even in that the 2-2 draw at Anfield last season, there were moments of brilliance from Sadio Mane and Mo Salah, but City on that day looked, phenomenal going forward as well. So we know how dangerous they are. But Liverpool were poor. I think it's probably out of the last sort of 4 or 5 years, barring that sort of slightly freakish result when Liverpool had all the centre-backs out, and I think was it 4-1 at Anfield with no fans in the stadium. Apart from that result, it sort of looked like the biggest gulf in quality that we've seen in Liverpool and Manchester City over the last few years. And I think in part it's to do with the time that they conceded the goal. I think it's a cliche, but they always say it's the worst time to concede straight after the break, and that proved true. Had Liverpool managed to sort of keep it tight for 10, 15 minutes, and then the pile of pressure on City a little bit, and things might start getting a little bit edgy, and the crowd get a little bit anxious, then that's when Liverpool might get another opportunity on the break. But because they conceded so early into the second half, City just went into cruise control then, and as you said, they didn't really have to be at full pelt. I think if they had gone sort of gung-ho and really wanted to, they could have got about 5 or 6. So, I think it was in part down to how early Liverpool conceded in the second half, because as soon as City went ahead, you didn't feel for a second they were gonna come back. And I think that is the biggest worry, and that's been the sort of unwelcome hallmark of Liverpool's season is this inability to respond to adversity. I remember being in the away ends a couple of years ago at Aston Villa when Liverpool were 1-0 down in like the 87th minute. I think it was in the title winning season, and then even at that point it didn't feel like all hope was lost. The fans felt it and the players felt it too, and you get Andy Robertson popping up with a header, and then Sadio Mane in stoppage time as well, and those sort of performances, we've become so accustomed to that under Jurgen Klopp, and I think that's why it's so sort of startling that there's been such a drop off this season, and the heads just seem to drop when things go against them.
Yeah, I mean, it's so strange, the mentality monsters they were dead, and it's not the first time this season where we've seen that. There's just a feeling that Liverpool aren't going to get that goal that, as you said, at that Aston Villa away game, that's a prime example of when even the fans, the players, the coaches, stuff, you could tell there was that belief and energy. I mean, you could look at Arsenal, Liverpool's opposition on Sunday. We'll come on to that later in the show. But this season, they've got that mentality. They never know when they're beat. You can really feel that energy within them. And it's something that Liverpool are just completely lacking. But we'll leave City there then. Gorsty, let's move on to Chelsea next, shall we? Maybe a slightly more positive angle we can take from this one. There are plenty of changes brought in and much changed Liverpool side. As Klopp was saying in his press conference this morning, a 0-0 draw at Chelsea away isn't a terrible result. It's somewhere Liverpool haven't exactly thrived in recent years. What's your thoughts on performance on Tuesday night?
Yeah, I don't think we were ever going to expect Liverpool to be flying at the Stamford Bridge, given that they just come off a pasting at the Etihad. So Klopp was saying, it was a bit of a battle on points, and he was quite happy enough with what he'd seen, basically based on the fact that that the weekend's result before it was so poor. He needed to show a little bit of a reaction, and he never expected them to just flick a switch and they're back to normal. That's all fair enough, I think. But my worry is, why are we now in the first week of April and you're still looking for Liverpool to rebuild from a kind of a base level? Why did they not have any momentum? Because they've just lost 3 in a row. It shouldn't be happening. When they went to Bournemouth, having come off that 7-0 win against Manchester United, that for me is where it's turned. The week they beat United, I looked at the league, and I think they might have been 6 behind Tottenham at the time, and obviously they had the game in hand and Tottenham to come. And I actually thought at the time, well, I don't think this will be an issue now. I think Liverpool will just go on and quite comfortably finish in the top 4. And then that defeat at Bournemouth was almost put them back to where they were months ago. It's just going to be a massively uphill task from here on in. And, a draw at Stamford Bridge in isolation is fine. It's a solid result. Andy Robertson said as much after the game and when we had a chance to speak to him. And that's all fair enough, in its own kind of vacuum, if you like. But Liverpool need to start picking up points. And given how poor Chelsea have been, they're in the bottom half. Aston Villa had gone there a couple of days earlier and won fairly comfortable. Liverpool didn't put Chelsea under any kind of pressure at all. I can't remember any real chance. Maybe Fabinho at the end of the first half. I think it Fofana went off for a corner. It's
the same as City goals, isn't it? I mean, they're all sort of counter-attacking and hopeful chances. There's no, real good chances being created, are there?
Yeah, I mean, you reluctantly accept that at City, because they're just about hitting the side of the exact right time, to be fair to them, and they're going for the title. Chelsea are nowhere near it. Chelsea are an absolute mess off the pitch, on and off the pitch. They've just taken on Frank Lampard again. They're a club who are just, they don't know who they are at the moment, and Liverpool went there, albeit having made 6 changes, but never really looked like they were going to lay a glove on them. So I actually think it's the 2 points drop there, as strange as it may sound, given that a draw at Chelsea is usually a decent result. But, perceptions, I wrote this in the verdict, perceptions can be, deceiving at times in football, but that on Tuesday night was exactly what it was. 8th going to 11th, and both of them battling it out for a draw, a 0-0 draw at that. Like Theo says, if Chelsea would have taken one of the 3 or 4 chances that they fashioned, they'd have won the game. Liverpool would have suffered the 10th Premier League defeat, and you're having another inquest. So it's they're going to have to completely change the type of performance on Sunday. The only perhaps saving grace is it is at Anfield, and it's Easter Sunday, and I think the crowd will be well up for it, and that might spur them on. And Liverpool haven't actually played at Anfield since they beat United 7-0, so we'll see. But yeah, I mean, they're on a tightrope now, and any setback they get now between here and the end of the season and top 4 is absolutely gone. And then you're thinking, well, what do you want Liverpool to do? Do you want them to finish in Europa League slot? So you're just looking for them to chuck it in for 6 weeks and see where they end up. That is a bit of a strange question for the fans to wrestle with, given the way they've been over the last 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really bleak, isn't it? I mean, Theo, what's your take on it? Because as Gorty says there, I agree with him. I think it is 2 points dropped when you look at the absolute mess Chelsea have been in this season, but particularly the past month or so that Chelsea have been in with Potter. I mean, really, really struggled. Now they've also got Lampard, which is an interesting appointment, I'll say the least. I mean, what's your thoughts on it, Theo? Do you think Liverpool had to go there and win? Because obviously Newcastle getting a result at United, they've got the results at West Ham. The top 4 is getting further and further away, isn't it?
Yeah, as Gorst said, it was 2 points drop. Like, you look at Chelsea's home results recently: lose to Villa, draw with Everton. Yeah, they beat Leeds, but they lose to Southampton. They draw with Fulham. They're just not a very good team, but they were the better team against Liverpool. Like, when you're talking about the Fabinho chance, yeah, but the only time Kepa's really been called into action was Joe Gomez from distance, a player who's never scored for the club, has had their best chance, and it was the right back who's really a centre back from 25 yards out. What on earth is going wrong there? A few positives you can say were Curtis Jones, considering he hasn't played much this season, was all right. Fabinho was lively off the bench. And I know Klopp's in the press conference said, well, at least there was a bit more intensity, a bit more passion. And that's a starting point. It's a base for them going into the Arsenal game. But that is the bare minimum what you expect from a Liverpool team. You need that bit of quality. And as bad as Saturday was, as bad as Tuesday was, that Wednesday was even worse. Like, you're looking up now and it's a 10-point deficit. And I know they're in the exact same position they were in 2 years ago, same number of points. They've actually got a superior goal difference to 2 years ago. They've got a game in hand. They've still got to play Tottenham. So things are in their hands, in their control. I think 2 years ago it was 7 points they had to make up. Now it's 10. While you could see realistically they could overtake a Villa, they could overtake Tottenham, Brighton could get distracted by the FA Cup and they overtake them. It seems a big ask to be able to overtake United or Newcastle at the moment. But this is what Liverpool have to do. They have to dig in. They have to find a way. Like, how they are the same team that beat United 7-0 at Anfield and then lose to Bournemouth and put in these performances. Baffling. But they have been this side home and away this season. 1 minute they're sublime, the next they're awful. They just haven't found it together in these away games. So the only blessing is it's Arsenal at Anfield. Arsenal haven't got the best record at Anfield. I think it's 10, 11 years since they last won at Anfield. You need Liverpool to make it count. I think we're not going to have to need a 7-goal thrashing. You just take any sort of win at the moment, but there needs to be some sort of boost there. And then you've got, after that, Leeds and Forest, teams at the wrong end of the table, teams that are struggling, but the teams that have beaten Liverpool earlier in the campaign, they need to find some consistency here. They need to find some quality. Like, it's all very well putting up a little bit more of a fight so you don't crumble after falling behind and you don't lose 4-1 or whatever. But if Havertz scores one of his chances or Felix scores one of his chances, it could be another really disappointing day in the capital against Chelsea. And this is against a side who don't really have an identity themselves. A manager who's never taken charge of a senior game before, who's only recently retired, and Bruno having only had a couple of days preparation. And now Lampard's back there. Like, Chelsea are such a mess. But then that sort of gave Liverpool a reality check of, if you can look second best against a Chelsea side in a mess, how bad are they at the moment? And, well, Liverpool have got these faint hopes now of maybe they can put it together, maybe they can sort of wrestle back top 4, or at least qualify for Europe. Chelsea's aim is, away from Champions League, is to just make sure that the biggest disappointment in the season label is given to Liverpool by the time the campaign's up. Liverpool have got a few weeks now to make sure that's not the case. But yeah, on recent evidence, you were not backing it at all. Whereas after United, we were all saying, yeah, top four is on now.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy the difference a couple of weeks can make. Because it's the United match, similar to both of you guys. I mean, I was adamant they were going to make the top four. And fun enough, the last pod we did actually, I think it was last Friday before the City match, I thought Newcastle were going to drop out because they just weren't scoring enough goals. I mean, I couldn't see it happening. And since then, they've won every match. I think they've scored something like 12 goals in 4 games, something crazy. I mean, completely turned their form around. I mean, Beth, what's your take on it there? The point Theo made about the Chelsea match, just to go back to that, about Klopp in his press conference this morning said he was really happy with the energy and the pressing. I personally disagree with that. I thought it was another relatively flat performance, to be honest. I think, as Theo said, the best chance was Joe Gomez pinging a 25-yarder. He's never scored for Liverpool. I mean, what's your take on that? Do you think Liverpool did show signs of improvement against Chelsea? Or do you think it was Klopp sort of being wishful ahead of Arsenal?
I think, anything had to be an improvement on that second half display at Manchester City. But I think it shows sort of how far Liverpool have fallen this season, that sort of performance is considered a step up from where they were, because it was poor, it was flat. I mean, as Theo said, he actually, I've not been too enamoured with Curtis Jones the last sort of 2 seasons, but I thought he did a decent enough job, as good as anyone else on the pitch, certainly anyway, and showed a little bit more sort of impetus in terms of wanting to get stuck into a tackle and get forward a little bit. But there was an absolute dearth of clear-cut chances, and it was so flat, and Liverpool were lucky not to be on the receiving end of another defeat, because Chelsea were comfortably better, I thought they were, and maybe there's an argument that's because they were at home and the crowd were up for it a little bit more because, the manager had just been sacked and whatever. But yeah, it was disappointing. It was a disappointing performance. And I think, for so many times this season, I've sort of thought Liverpool are going to do it, because it almost, under Jurgen Klopp, it sort of seems inconceivable that they're not going to get top 4, because we've seen them so many times. Even that season when they were sort of completely ravaged by injury, they managed to come back, as Theo said, and make up a huge deficit and get back into the top 4. So you're just waiting for that run to sort of string itself together, aren't you, with the coming games? But Liverpool haven't shown this season that they're capable of winning more than 3-4 games in a row, have they? And you look at that run-in, actually, and Liverpool's, after the Arsenal game, it's a fairly favourable run-in. The Tottenham game, probably the most difficult one, and that's at home. So, you'd fancy them in years gone by to win most of those games. But actually, when you look at this season, it's been against those sort of the lowlier opposition that they've struggled. So you wouldn't hang your hat on Liverpool winning any of those games, really. I don't think any of them are going to be easy games. So they really have to book their ideas up. And I think it's, I suppose we've been so privileged that we've got to watch them be at the top table for so long, under Jurgen Klopp. And now actually the idea of dropping back into Europa League is it's almost a bit of snobbery there. Like, we're too good to be in Europa League. And I do wonder sometimes, do the players feel that too? I think they have been guilty, especially the defeat to Bournemouth, of sort of underestimating their opposition and overestimating their own sort of quality at the moment, because they were so poor and they were outfought and outworked at Bournemouth, and that they risk that being the case again in some of the remaining games. The likes of Leeds and Southampton, that they're not going to sort of roll over for Liverpool, especially having got done well against them earlier in the season, Leeds and Nottingham Forest. So yeah, I think I've got to say, I'm not a believer now. I don't think top 4 will happen. I think they've spurned one too many sort of opportunities to get themselves back into that race. I think that could turn again if they were to get a win against Arsenal. But yeah, I think Newcastle look way too strong, really, and I struggle to see them sort of fall in, and Liverpool managing to string a run together.
Yeah, and it's a combination of so many things. I'm, similarly accepting that I think Liverpool will be in the Europa League next season now. And I think it's not just the fact that United and Newcastle are looking relatively stronger. It's the teams Liverpool are going to play in that run-in will be absolutely fighting for survival points. So many of the teams are in the relegation battle because there are so many teams down there this season. And the way Liverpool's mentality has been, I just can't see them being as up for matches. I know it's such a cliche thing to say, and I shouldn't be questioning the Liverpool players' commitment. But the commitment you see from other clubs, I think, will be superior in that sense when they're fighting for Premier League survival. And now Liverpool, I think they kind of know they probably won't get the Champions League. I think if results don't go their way, because, Arsenal top of the league, I think that really could be the nail on the coffin on that one. It's quite bleak times on that one, that we could be staring the Europa League in the face. But Gorsty, moving on to subject now then, something that's probably been one of the major talking points this week. At the Etihad and at Stamford Bridge, there were numerous Hillsborough-related chants. Obviously, won't name them, but we know what they are. Everyone knows what they are. By all accounts, they were absolutely ringing around the Etihad and Stamford Bridge. I mean, just awful scenes once again, Gorsty. And, once again, we're coming up to the Hillsborough Memorial service at Anfield. It's really shocking that this is still happening in 2023, isn't it?
It is. I go back to 12 months ago when Liverpool were playing Manchester City in an FA Cup semi-final at Wembley, and I think Manchester City came out with an apology after that one. Pep Guardiola sort of mealy-mouthed the apology in the press conference, I think, from what I can remember. And here we are 12 months later, it's happening again. City are apologising. And for me, it's the apologies that are just, they're just baseless at this point. They don't mean anything. You've got the Premier League stepping in saying where it's a similar effect. And look, I don't know how you go about policing all these idiots and the amount of morons who are in the stands singing it, but the clubs themselves have got a duty to maybe be acting a lot more strongly than they are. I wrote something about the City and Liverpool rivalry before last week, actually, and City told the Liverpool fan who complained about it last year that they'd identified a number of people who were caught on video singing these songs, and gave them a banning order, basically banned them from City games for singing these songs, and that, to my mind, was the first time that had ever happened. It was quite a strong punishment, a firm sanction, and a really good deterrent if it actually happened. Because I was shown the email from City's supporter compliance manager, from the people who made the initial complaint. So I emailed Manchester City in October, I think, basically saying this is quite interesting to our knowledge. This will be the first time that this has ever been handed down, and we think it's quite a strong deterrent. Can we have a little bit more information around this? And they never responded. And if you're if you're that way inclined to think, did City do anything at all about it? Are they not just this just something he said to try and pacify one complaint about Hillsborough Chanting, because it's still going on? Every time Liverpool play Manchester City now, you hear these chants, and I was disgusted to hear it at Nottingham Forest in October. That club of all their supporters should know exactly what they're saying. It's not point scoring. It's nothing like that. It's that was a disappointing one to hear. And then at Chelsea again, it happened on Tuesday night. There needs to be a little bit of a clear kind of line in the sand between what constitutes, chants against your rivals, which can be near to the bone, but fair enough, and chants about, tragedies that have killed football supporters, however many years ago. It doesn't matter, does it? But yeah, it's disappointing to see it going on. But I think as long as just these kind of, empty apologies keep coming and nothing else gets done about it, it's just going to be rinse and repeat, sadly.
Yeah, I mean, it's so difficult. I mean, Theo, what is the solution to it? I mean, I don't really know myself. We saw there was a similar chant, obviously a homophobic chant related to Chelsea fans. There's a big story in the news about that, and there's lots actually done around that to try and eradicate that as a chant. And I remember Liverpool did a lot of work with the homophobic supporters trust at Liverpool. I think that's what it's called. And the gay Liverpool fans did some great work with Jurgen Klopp around that chant that was at the time. We don't really hear that often now, but we're still here going to the Etihad and Stamford Bridge, and Hillsborough chants are absolutely ringing around the whole stadium, Theo. I mean, is there a way you can eradicate this? Is that possible at all? Is it education? Do you try and maybe increase the stewarding? I mean, is there a way around it? You're just on mute, Theo.
Sorry about that. It just needs to be treated more seriously, doesn't it? There needs to be that stern action. Like City, if they threatened that last year to actually ban fans, whether they followed through or not, it needs to be something that this is not acceptable. Like, it's not that the fans that died, they were unlawfully killed. Like, they were victims of this awful tragedy that could happen to any club, any fan base. And it's been this narrative for so long, oh, Liverpool fans are at fault. And even though that's been disproven so many times, and it's laughable how many times they still have to hear these ridiculous chants, it's just an insult to the memories, and it's an insult to the survivors, the families, the club. Just do better. But it's the case for every fan base. Like, there will be supporters who have chanted about Munich over the years or any other disaster. It's pathetic point scoring that is just not worth really the time. Why do it? There are so many things you can chant. Like, we find Steven Gerrard falling on his backside chants pretty tiresome, but at least that won Man City a league. At least that was against Chelsea and they got that victory that day. It's tiresome, but that is acceptable. Chanting about supporters losing their lives, being unlawfully killed, it's baffling, isn't it? Why are you singing about this? Why is this deemed acceptable? Why is that something that you think is going to be helping you get one over on Liverpool? It just shows that you're not educated about it. You don't really understand. Like for me, I think it's something that really came into practice more after Luis Suarez saga, when Liverpool wear those shirts, and maybe that's where, you're always the victims. Luis Suarez has said this slur against Patrice Evra, and that's come from this, but it isn't. That is not where it started. It's come from Hillsborough. It just needs better education. There needs to be a stronger approach from these rival clubs. Like, it could happen to anyone. Like, granted, we're in a day now where you'd like to think it doesn't happen, but we saw how close it could have happened in Paris. If Liverpool fans hadn't had those tragic experiences in the past, maybe we would be talking about another football tragedy in Paris less than a year ago. It's one where over 30 years now, we're not getting any closer to the answers. We're only just now getting something close to justice. But yeah, it's not good enough. It's never been good enough.
Yeah, I mean,
just to kind of interject there, you mentioned at the top of your question to Theo about the Chelsea chanting. I remember that was the first game of last season when Liverpool played Norwich, and Billy Gilmour was on loan from Chelsea. He came on for Norwich that day, and the chants were started, and then cop-outs, who Paul Aman, who heads up that organisation, he's actually on the Liverpool supporters board. He sat down with Jurgen Klopp and the club did, a very kind of enlightening thing of why you don't sing that song going forward. And to be fair, it's something we haven't heard in I haven't heard it anyway in any of the games I've been to against Chelsea, and they played them 4 times last season, twice at Wembley, obviously Stamford Bridge and Anfield. Played them twice this season. Haven't heard it in any of those games. So that's certainly a message that, fans being educated in as to what it means and why it's not worth singing. It's kind of derogatory to people in their own fan base, and for whatever reason, Liverpool supporters generally have learned a lesson from that one and haven't sung it since. So fair play for the club for doing that, and for obviously cop-outs and Paul Aman for basically pushing forward that message. You just hope that other clubs could do something similar around why it's you don't sing about the fact that Liverpool supporters died in the Leppings Lane end over 3 decades ago now. Maybe that is something that you're talking about, how to kind of eradicate it. Maybe that's something that can be done, but we'll see what happens. I don't know about any views, but I'm sick to the back teeth of just these kind of empty apologies now that come after every game, and we cover it as kind of as honestly as you can. But once you file that story, you think, well, what's the next steps? What happens now? Are these clubs going to do anything? And so far, I think they've come up short.
My concern there is Klopp has always been really outspoken throughout his reign at Liverpool, and he's been there 8 years now. What he says goes. His word is law. Liverpool fans lap up everything he says, and there is such a strong connection there. He just gets it. How many other clubs have that connection with players at their club, or at least figureheads, their managers, when we're seeing sackings happen so regularly? Like, you'd imagine if Pep Guardiola came out and spoke really strongly and passionately and said, no, this is acceptable, put your foot down, maybe there's an argument that would have some sort of impact at Man City. And ironically, maybe Frank Lampard could have that sort of impact now at Chelsea, but there isn't that same strong connection where we've sung this for years. But you get it. You understand. Like, Liverpool fans, Jurgen Klopp has always been so outspoken on so many subjects, and they've always supported in there. Yes, you are right. Whether it's something like, you need to get your vaccine against COVID, to these homophobic chants from last season, I just don't think there's that same connection in other fan bases. There needs to be that strength of character to come out and be a figurehead. And Klopp is one of the very few people in English football that actually is willing to do that and doesn't really fear any backlash. I suppose playing-wise, Jordan Henderson's another one. These are really great role models. Marcus Rashford at United, he is one. But you need these strong figureheads, and there needs to be more of them to take responsibility. But then, at the same time, they aren't the ones who are responsible for the chants. They can just use their powers to try and stop it, but it's up to the people involved, the fans, to actually think, yeah, we're better than this.
I was going to make that exact point, Theo, as well. I completely agree with you on that. Liverpool fans will listen to Klopp, but Liverpool as a place as well, and the fan base is sort of a typically, politically left-leaning, very accepting city and people. And lots of other fan bases. The reality is they aren't. They won't hear it. They tend to be a lot more conservative in their views, and it can be very hard to convince them of these things. But also with homophobia, it's relatable because you will know fans that are gay, and that there are gay fans within every fan base. Not every fan base has had fans involved in football tragedies, thankfully so. But Liverpool are sort of unique in that sense. Lots of fan groups can't relate. Obviously, there is the Leeds have their link today. I can't remember saying. I think someone from the Hillsborough Survivors Supporters Association was saying today in a video that there's plenty of other fans from other clubs that don't have those experiences to relate to, and it's a really unique situation. I mean, I'm not sure what the situation and solution is to it, Beth. I mean, we've obviously seen the Hillsborough Survivors Support Alliance start the petition with the UK government to make chanting about tragedies and death at a football match a criminal offence. Do you think that is the way forward? I mean, do you think it needs to be criminalised? That's the way to get rid of it?
I think serious action needs to be taken, and if that is going down the criminal route, then so be it. I think, as Gorsty said, it does feel like there's just these sort of mealy-mouthed apologies and platitudes that come out after every game, and nothing's done. And I think, one thing that was actually really disappointing when that petition was shared online is the vast majority of responses to it were from rival fans making the point of, Liverpool fans chant about Munich and various other things, and it shouldn't be about that. I'm sure that there's members of Liverpool's fan base that in the past have been culpable of chanting about things that they shouldn't have been chanting about, and it'd be naive to say that all of Liverpool's fans are are squeaky clean and haven't sort of said and done wrong things in the past. But that's not what it should be about. It shouldn't be about point scoring. All of these tragedies that affect various different clubs, they've had devastating impacts on so many lives. And I think to sort of bat away one and sort of say, well, it's okay because someone in the past has chanted about another one is, completely the wrong way to go about it. I'm someone who I'd like to think I'm fairly educated about Hillsborough. Obviously I wasn't born at the time, but my dad was there and I've grown up being taught about it. But even last year I was at the Labour Party conference for work reasons, and I was sat in on a talk where a number of the Hillsborough survivors and the families of the victims spoke, and I was so moved and in a way that I didn't think I would be, because I've heard these stories countless times before, but when you hear it firsthand from people who've lost family members, what it's done and the impact it's still having, more than 3 decades on, it's devastating. And I think we do need clubs to maybe take more of responsibility and come out and as Liverpool made that video about the Chelsea chanting, a more enlightening video and getting the voices of the survivors and the families of these people out there, and almost directly appealing to people to say that this is the impact. And I think the really frustrating thing about modern football is this vitriol that now exists, especially online. It's so toxic sometimes, football Twitter, and it's so easy to sort of try and point score, but it goes beyond that. And just because one club has chanted about something in the past doesn't mean it's okay to then retaliate by doing the same thing. So I think that the petition is perhaps one way, certainly to get it just into the public consciousness, because I think so many people do it now without even thinking, and they think it's just banter and part of going to the football and having a laugh with your mates. But actually I don't think people realise the impact that has, and for the families and the survivors, every time they hear that chant, it brings it back up, it brings it all back to the surface. And I think that's something that needs to be made clear to fans of all clubs. Yeah,
I mean, the thing that's so upsetting and frustrating with it, as you mentioned there, Beth, you see rival fans commenting on it on social media posts. It's never, an acceptance that it's wrong and it's terrible to do. There's always a complaint. There's always, Liverpool fans do this. There's always a one-upmanship with that. It shouldn't be a one-upmanship. There should be a flat thing across the board where everyone accepts that it's wrong. It should be a criminal offence, I think, because it shouldn't be happening. And it baffles me that people can continue to make arguments for it and, you know, trying to justify it. I mean, it just is incomprehensible to me. But yeah, I mean, Ghosty, you're going to jump in there on that?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, it's always the one where, you know, when they sing, always the victims, it's never your fault. And when Liverpool fans push back against that, the response is always, you know, it's not to do with Hillsborough. Why are you making it about that? And, you know, if you say something that offends someone, and then when they say we're offended by that, you say, oh, why are you taking it to mean that? Like, that is a fault on you, really. I think it's more a case of being okay. Well, fair enough. You know, we didn't realise that is how it's taken. That is what it means. Maybe we'll just stop doing it from now on. It's always the argument of it doesn't mean that, and then that in their minds allows them to carry on singing it, you know, without reproach. So maybe that's something that can be looked at, but. Obviously, it's probably going to be in the news a bit more, isn't it, over the next couple of weeks as we get towards the 34th anniversary around this time next week, is it? So yeah, it's just sad that it carries on happening. And I remember being at the Ajax game in the Champions League in October and being struck by how refreshing it was, because I think Liverpool were in a real run of games there. It's Forest, City. Possibly another one I can't quite remember. It just seemed like it was happening every week. We were hearing it every single game, and then to go to the Amsterdam Arena, and it was just none of it at all. And you know, they were really welcoming, probably too welcoming in all honesty. Liverpool went and battered them on the pitch that night, but it was just different. It was just refreshing not to hear it, and it'd just be nice for that to just be the norm. But sadly, as seems to be the case, that isn't the case.
And if it is one where supporters go, oh, it's not about Hillsborough, it's just this generic thing where, I don't know, you're saying that you didn't foul someone and, you know, fans are getting angry whether it's something generic on a pitch like a penalty or that, well, then you'd sing it to every side. You don't. It's only Liverpool have to suffer this. Same as it's only Liverpool and Everton that have to have the poverty chants about feed the Scousers and all that. It is personal. It is about Hillsborough. They can sidestep that all they like. There are a couple of tragedies that have happened in Liverpool's past that are reasons for them singing these chants. If they really want to claim that as generic as what is happening on the pitch, then it would be this common chant that everyone sings over the smallest things, and that is not the case at all. It's just delusion there to try and justify these awful actions.
Yeah, it's weak justification, weak excuses, and weak apologies from the clubs week in, week out. And, you know, I really hope that something can come of this. It's the Hillsborough Survivors Support Alliance have started the UK government petition, make chanting about tragedies and death at a football match a criminal offence. Go and sign, everyone, if you obviously want this to go further forward. I think government have to respond to it now because it's got more than 10,000 signatures at the time of recording. But we'll leave that one there then. Gorst, obviously, Liverpool will be remembering Hillsborough at Anfield this Sunday when they take on Arsenal. Now, Arsenal are a side that have struggled at Anfield in recent years, as Theo said at the top of the show, but they're a very different bag this year, aren't they? I mean, top of the league, absolutely flying. It looks like they could be the ones that maybe take City's crown from them. What are you expecting on Sunday?
Yeah, it could, couldn't it? You know, I've kind of been, you know, as it's become increasingly obvious that Liverpool aren't going to be winning the Premier League title, I've kind of been off the mindset of, you know, if Liverpool aren't going to win it, then hope Man City win it just because, you know, it's kind of just furthers this narrative of it becoming a little bit of a one team league, and it's, you know, if Liverpool, if, you know, the best Liverpool team that, you know, certainly I'd argue any of us have seen in our lifetime can only win one in 5 years, then that just gives you an idea of how City have kind of monopolised it through fair or foul means, which we will hear about in the future. But then I was having a chat with a colleague last week at the press conference who made the case for why we should want Arsenal to win the league, and he totally convinced me in the idea that you never heard any of the Hillsborough nonsense from Arsenal. They're kind of secure enough in themselves as a big club to only sing about their own players, their own chants and whatever else. And they're a classy club who have got a lot of respect for Liverpool and vice versa. So the more he kind of made the case, I was thinking, yeah, fair enough. You know, it might rankle a little bit the greatest Liverpool side that we've ever seen has only won the same amount of Premier League titles as Mikel Arteta's Arsenal. But, fair play to them. They've done it the right way. They built up with stability. They've made some true acquisitions at the right time and are going great guns with a squad who are full of exciting young players. So I actually do hope that they go and beat City to the league now. But by the same token, that doesn't mean I want them to come away from Anfield with 3 points on Sunday. I think we will get a different Liverpool to the one we've seen, certainly at Bournemouth and in the second half against City and then against Chelsea. I think Klopp said today it's got to be more than just Anfield, for the reasons for Liverpool putting on a performance. But that's always there, isn't it? When it's a big game at Anfield, Liverpool generally tend to turn up. They have done this season. They beat Manchester City. They absolutely hammered Manchester United to historical levels. So I think they will show up on Sunday. To be fair, it'll just be a case of how can Arsenal kind of weather that storm, and we'll see what they're really made of. But they've had a superb season, and they thoroughly deserve to be where they are. And good on them. To be fair, I actually do hope they go and beat City to the league now. And I suppose it's for a neutral, it's something to keep you entertained, isn't it, in the final weeks of the season? Because certainly Liverpool are not really doing much.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Theo, Arsenal have come on leaps and bounds since last season, haven't they? I mean, we had the tight League Cup game, but then I think they also battered them in the league, didn't they, when Mikel Arteta lost his head on the sidelines, unless I'm getting my seasons confused there. But it's the polar opposite to what we're seeing from them this season, isn't it? As Gorst said there, it's such a nice rebuild they've had there. Really nice football in that side. I mean, what are you expecting from them on Sunday yourself, and do you think they can go all the way too?
Arsenal, they're a really likeable team with likeable young players. Like Saka is one of these great role models in English football. I think it's real credit to him how he bounced back from the racist abuse he received after the Euro 2020 final. Like, you see other players crumble a little bit after that, but he's just gone from strength to strength. He plays with a smile on his face, and he's a player I think all opposing fans just love to watch. Martinelli's the same. Like, these are two players that Klopp has spoken about publicly a number of times and sung the praises of. And you think for a normal season where Liverpool were competing with City for the title and Arsenal were down in mid-table struggling to get into Europe, you'd be thinking, yeah, those two are probably going to look to move on, and Liverpool could be looking for like long-term replacements and for their forward line. Like, looking at Arsenal now, it's almost like when Liverpool first took that next step under Jurgen Klopp, when it was Salah and Mane at their absolute best out wide, cutting inside and like so much pace and goals. And there are times this season where I look at Arsenal and I thought, nah, they're not going to do it. City just always find a way. City come strong in the second half of the season. City always win. But then you see some of their games recently, like I think was it Villa, Bournemouth, where they've come back late on. You think, okay, they do have that mentality. This is what we saw from Liverpool in their own title-winning year. Yes, it hurts a little bit that Arsenal just turn up and win the title in a year where Liverpool and Chelsea fall apart, where City aren't at their best. Same as it hurt a little bit when Leicester just turned up and won the league, where, well, if Liverpool had their acts together that year, they might have had a chance. But so many top sides can say this. And you've still got to give Arsenal credit. Like, they've spent well, they've brought good players through. But you still feel it's a bit of a role reversal for Liverpool. It's a bit like Space Jam, isn't it? Like, they've got Liverpool players' talent from like recent years. They're now the ones competing for these titles as Liverpool face up to the possibility of not making the Champions League. Like, if Liverpool were the mentality monsters, maybe Arsenal are now the Monstars. We need a LeBron James to rock up at Anfield and demand they give Liverpool players their talents back. But yeah, the credit to watch. It's great to see what they've done, and yeah, they are more likeable than Man City, at least. I know Guy Clark, our former Blood Red editor, will obviously be very excited when in these last few weeks. It's nice for a fan like him who has had some tough times watching his side over the last few years when they've been pretty poor, like for them to actually have that excitement of going through this. You see tweets though, you're going, how the hell have Liverpool fans coped with this for 4 or 5 years? Like, where every game is just so stressful, going every goal counts, every minute counts, and any slip up and Man City just there, they're going to pounce. They've still got some big turns ahead, and you hope this weekend will be a slip up for them. But they have seemed to have got that mentality, that spirit in them now that defined Liverpool for all these recent seasons.
Yeah, lots of admiration for Arsenal there. Guy Clark, if you're listening, I hope you don't win the title. But as Theo was saying there are so many similarities between this Arsenal side and the Liverpool side of the past few years. I mean, it's freakishly so in this title race. We've all been there before, haven't we? Racing City in a title race, Wolves on the last day. There's so many similarities between the two sides. I mean, do you think Arsenal can go all the way and do it? And do you want them to?
I think they will. I didn't for a long time. I wasn't really convinced. I was convinced that they'd fall away, and that maybe injuries would hit and the squad would start to look a little bit thin, and City would just have this resurgence. I thought actually when City beat them at the Emirates that might be the turning point, and then I think it was the Villa game after that when they fell behind twice, and you're thinking, they could be starting to crumble, and fair play to them, they came back, and against Bournemouth again they showed that mentality and that resilience, and that's something that Liverpool have had in spades in recent years, and something that we know goes a long way to helping you win and helping you to win titles. So I do think they'll do it. I think it is a very decisive few weeks for them. They've obviously got Liverpool on Sunday, and I think it was Jamie Carragher said earlier in the week, it's a bit of a litmus test for them. They've obviously not had the best record at Anfield in recent years, and regardless of where Liverpool are at, you know how devastating they can be at Anfield. We've seen it against United, against Manchester City earlier in the season. So it will be a big test. And if they come through that, then I think they'll be buoyed by that, regardless of where Liverpool are in the table. And then they've obviously got City, Chelsea as well, Newcastle. So I think they've got a tricky run in. And it's whether, City have just got that extra bit of guile and that extra little bit of experience to help them get over the line, because they look in really fine form at the moment. I'm sort of conflicted. For most of the season, I've been very sort of resentful of wanting them to win the title, because I just think, as we said, Liverpool we've come so close on so many occasions. That when City were 2-0 down at Anfield last season, 2-0 down at the Etihad, in the final game of the season, Anfield was sort of really tense, and that was sort of one of my worst experiences, I think, at a football game, because it was just, anxiety was through the absolute roof. But so for Arsenal to sort of come out of nowhere really and do that on the first attempt, it would be tough to take. But actually, in a sense, it could be quite reassuring, because if you look at where Arsenal were last season, I think it was they lost the first 3 or 4 games of the campaign, and they missed out on Europe the Champions League the last 2 seasons, and now look at them. They've recruited well, and they've got a manager who's implemented the style that he wants them to play, and they're on this real upward trajectory. And I suppose it just shows that Liverpool next season, if they do get Europa League, it's not the worst thing. It's a chance to maybe blood some younger players and get a run in a European competition and come back strong in the league. So I think I do want them to win the league. Actually, that's only quite a recent development, but hopefully that doesn't help them on Sunday.
Recent as in mid-sentence there.
Yeah, I sort of made my mind up halfway through. Yeah, I do. I think after that pacing at Manchester City last week, I've sort of lost any desire for them to go and win another league title. So yeah, I am backing Arsenal to win, but I think they've got a tough few weeks coming up.
Yeah, I do admire the rebuild job that Arteta's done there, Beth, the point you make, because it does look like Liverpool won't be in the Champions League next season, and the drop-off in money from that is significant. I mean, you can be about 100, 150 million down on your total revenue from not being in the Champions League alone and being in the Europa League. So to see Arsenal come out of that, it has taken time, but they've trusted Arteta and it's worked. And hopefully Liverpool, God forbid that scenario does happen, will trust Klopp to get that full rebuild in. It might take time, but there is, it shows that it works, and Liverpool will be title contenders again. There's no doubt about that. If Arsenal can, Liverpool definitely can. With that, then, shall we pick our teams for Liverpool against Arsenal on Sunday? Gorsty, we'll start with you then for your defence. Alisson Becker will obviously be between the sticks. Virgil van Dijk training today. He's recovered from his illness after a rest at Chelsea midweek. Are you throwing him straight back in?
Yeah, 100%. Canate. Son comes back in, and so does Andy Robertson.
Theo, how about yourself?
Yeah, Van Dijk's back in. Canate alongside him. Didn't think Matip was particularly great at Chelsea. He's better than Tsimikas at least, so Robertson definitely comes back in. I would have been tempted to have Joe Gomez keep his place, but he missed training, didn't he, yesterday? And I don't think Klopp actually offered an update on the players that missed training yesterday. I think Doyley asked the question and he was told it's part of the recovery, that sometimes they need that second day, but then there's like footage of a couple of them limping. So maybe it will just be a case of Trent coming back in. And that's back to the 4 that started against Man City and were destroyed in that second half. So I would like to see Gomez, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's Trent.
Yeah, Beth, how about yourself? Is there any case for Matip and Gomez? And then if you want to talk us through midfield after your defence as well.
Yeah, I would. If Gomez was fit, I think I'd be tempted to keep him in. I thought he did a decent enough job. As we said, probably had one of the best chances of the game. And I just think, maybe if you keep it tight against Arsenal for the first sort of 50 minutes or so, and then you need in a goal, bring Trent on. I think, yeah. But obviously, if Gomez is unavailable, then you bring Trent in, and then midfield. Obviously, it looks like Thiago is going to be back. Depends how fit he is, I suppose. I think if he is fit enough to start, then definitely he starts alongside Fabinho. And then Jordan Henderson, we know what he can bring in these sort of bigger games, especially at Anfield. So I'd be tempted to go Henderson, Fabinho, and Thiago, as Klopp's done for a lot of the big games in the past when all three have been fit.
Yeah, it appears to be arguably his most trusted midfield. I mean, Gorst, what's your take on that? Thiago has just come back from a very long injury, longer than first expected. Would you throw him straight in, or would you ease him back? Because he's aggravated injuries so often this season, isn't he?
No, I wouldn't be starting him. Feels like he's been out for ages now, actually, doesn't it?
Since the Wolves game at the start of February, yeah.
Yeah, I'll be bringing back Harvey Elliott and keeping Fabinho and Henderson in there. Not too sure why Elliott was missing on Tuesday. Actually, he wasn't injured or anything. I think Klopp just made the point of dropping a lot, to be fair, and he was dropped entirely from the squad. He's obviously played a lot of football this season. For someone who only turned 20 on Tuesday, that was the only game he hasn't featured in, wasn't it? So maybe a rest could do him good, and I'd be bringing him back in, keeping Fabinho and Henderson in there.
Yeah, I mean, Theo is Gorsty's midfield there. It's the one we saw last game at Anfield in the 7-0 win over Man United. Would you hopefully keep that momentum going from that one with the same midfield? And then if you want to pick your attack as well.
It's a hard one. I'd probably drop Henderson. It's been such an intense week for Liverpool. These Henderson and Fabinho have played two. To ask them to play a third might be a bit of a stretch when we know they haven't been at their best this season. You think, well, if you've got one of them on the bench, you can bring them on for the other after an hour, so rest them a little bit, because those are the two players that the legs haven't quite been there. I don't think Thiago is going to be ready to start because it has been a long layoff. So maybe you stick with Curtis Jones. He did well enough against Chelsea. He at least showed a bit more energy. So they're willing to win the ball back. Harvey Elliott, he's someone you could shout to come back in. Obviously, he was missed the game against Chelsea. I think he was just rested. He lost his record, didn't he, of featuring in every game this season. But when you're playing against Arsenal, a trio of Jones, Elliott, and Fabinho seems very offensive, shall we say? You think you need a bit more conservative.
I was going to make the case for actually Milner to go on man mark and Martin Odegaard. I mean, it's not a bad shout, is it?
That is where I'm going. I think James Milner could come in. He's experienced. He's still got that energy, doesn't he? He's a leader in there. When other players' stands have been lacking, maybe it's a chance for him. He's still got something to play for individually, of course, with his contract as well. He hasn't let that fall down when he's been turned to this season. But again, he's another player. You're not going to get full 90 minutes out of him in midfield. Just hoping for the best here, aren't we? Oh, yeah, you want him to go on attack as well, didn't you?
I was just I agree with the Milner pick. I think the way to combat Martin Odegaard, who's arguably been the best player in the league this season, or one of the best players in the league, I think you need someone like Milner to get in there and rough it up a bit and, make the game a bit sloppy and a bit scrappy. And I think that's how you beat this Arsenal side, because they're very clean and tidy. And if you can try and stop Odegaard in that sense, as anti-football as that may sound, that's the situation Liverpool are in, believe it or not. So depressingly, I think that's the way to go about it. But no one asked me, Theo. So if you want to go on into your attack.
Nunes keeps his place on the left. It was a surprise to see him subbed early-ish against Chelsea. He was a lively attacker there. I'm dropping Jota. I know he likes a goal against Arsenal, but he's not been consistent, really, has he? He's been in and out of these games. He's still trying to get back to his best, and we know his goal scoring drought now is is it over a year now, or is he's just coming up to the anniversary if he hasn't just passed it? Maybe he'll get his goal off the bench against Arsenal. So I'm actually going Firmino down the middle. I thought he did well against Chelsea. He's another player who likes a goal against Arsenal, and only got a few games left at Anfield. Let's enjoy him while we can. And Mohamed Salah, he's one of those players limping after Chelsea, missed training yesterday. But he's like Luis Suarez, doesn't he? He always finds a way to play. You're just hoping he's fit enough to at least start. Again, it seems to be the case for most of Liverpool's forwards. They all love a goal against Arsenal. So you're hoping that all this comes together and we see maybe not a 7-0, but them turning it on and Salah's fit enough to start.
Yeah, I mean, Beth, it's quite a bit of a headache picking the attack now, actually, with all these players coming back from injury and stuff. I mean, Roberto Firmino was very good at Chelsea, wasn't he? Do you think he's got a case to start on Sunday?
I mean, I think very good's probably a bit of a stretch. I think he was
One of the better performers, yeah.
best of a bad bunch for about 20 minutes and then sort of faded. No, I wouldn't bring Bobby back in. I think I'd bring Gakpo in. I'd put Gakpo on the left. I think that's his favourite position. I know Klopp doesn't seem to like playing him there. I think he's obviously played him as that sort of false nine role, hasn't he? But if I was picking the team, I would put Gakpo on the left, Nunez through the middle, and Mohamed Salah, if he's fit, obviously back on the right. I think, one of Liverpool's most potent forms of attack in recent years has been the fullbacks getting forward and whipping balls into the box. And I think if you've got someone like Nunez there in the middle ready to sort of get on the ends of one of them, that's why it's, I've been surprised actually how much he's been played on the left because, I know he's done well there to be fair, but, he's such that he is sort of looks like your typical number 9 at least and has that sort of physicality. So, I'd go Gakpo, Nunez and Salah as my front three.
Yeah, I mean, Gorst, as Beth said there, it's quite an interesting one actually with the Gakpo-Nunez situation because we saw Gakpo playing on the left and Nunez through the middle at the start of the year. Then it changed to Gakpo being to the middle and it was very effective. And now we're seeing again that Nunez isn't as effective out wide. I mean, how would you line up your attack?
Yeah, it is an interesting one. We had the chance to speak to Gakpo after the game, and that was one of the questions I put to him about him. Basically, coming to the club, having established himself as a bit of a left winger for Holland and PSV, but Klopp's trying to turn him into a bit more of a number 9, and he said it's something he's having to adjust to and develop, but he's kind of getting tips from Roberto Firmino, who's played that centre forward role at Liverpool, as well as anyone, hasn't he, in the last 15 years. So he's it's a difficult one. I think Klopp is just going to persist with Gakpo as a number 9 and Nunez off the left. I think eventually next season when everyone's fit and firing, I don't think there's much disparity between what might be his first choice front three and the second choice front three. I think there is the option there to move them about, whether that's Nunez down the middle and Diaz off the left, or Gakpo off the left and Nunez down the centre. There's plenty of flexibility there, but I just think now between now and the end of the season he will stick with Gakpo through the middle and Nunez on the left.
I mean, just on that Gorst, in that point, I mean, Klopp said Luis Diaz will be back for the Leeds game. When Luis Diaz is back, I mean, what do you do then with the attack? I mean, I put this question to all three of you. It's a bit of a dilemma what to do in attack, really, isn't it?
I don't think it is, to be fair. I think the fact that Diaz has been out for so long, I think he'll just be restricted to cameo appearances, really. Certainly for the next few weeks. I don't really envision him coming straight back into the team after over 6 months out. So I think we're going to see the best of him next season when he's had the full pre-season under his belt and he's fit and ready again. I think it might just be a case of easing him back in.
Yeah, I think like Gorsty said, I think as well when you've had a knee injury in particular, you always sort of fear what player is going to come back when someone's been sidelined for so long, and it's obviously a recurrence of a knee injury. You're just hoping that he hasn't lost a yard of pace and he hasn't lost some of those sort of the blistering sort of qualities that he had when he was at his best. So I think between now and the end of the season, we'll probably see him coming off the bench and hopefully being able to make an impact from there. But I certainly don't see him as a starter probably until next season.
I feel a bit like Jurgen Klopp here because you've asked us this question a few times over the last few weeks. I might just go ask better questions, Pat. He's getting a bit better about repeating himself, isn't he? Yeah, as the others said, it's such a long layoff. You're waiting to see what state Diaz comes back in, but you're going to have to phase him back in. They can't just throw him back into the starting 11. Even if you get that little bit of an adrenaline boost like we saw from Harvey Elliott last year, we didn't see any more from Elliott once that wore off until like May time, and he had more time to get back up to speed in the full pre-season. Then he was ready to go. So I think when you've got so many attacking options, there's no sense in just throwing Diaz back in. Wait until he is absolutely 100% right. Hopefully he can become an impact sub in these final few weeks, and then you want to be in a position where he can be first choice again next season. But there's still plenty to play for. Hopefully he can have some sort of impact, even if he isn't going to be starting week in, week out and doing what we saw him do for the first half of the season and last season as well.
Yeah, I mean, Theo, there was me thinking you'd had some Easter forgiveness and weren't going to criticise me after an hour of podcasting, but how wrong was I?
It's a bumper edition, isn't it?
This is a bumper edition of the Blood Red podcast. But yeah, with Diaz, I mean, just on that, I mean, there's such a serious injury to his knee. There's even the case where you could play him through the middle if he has lost that yard of pace. I think he's got the skill set to do that. It could be a curveball option maybe for next season to phase him into that. But right then, let's round off the pod. It's been a longer one than usual, so we'll do our score predictions, everyone, for Liverpool against Arsenal on Sunday. I'm not sure that we'll be as positive on this as we were ahead of the last home game, shall we say. Gorst, how do you think it's going to
go? I can see a draw. I think it'll be an entertaining 2-2 draw.
Very interesting. Theo, yourself?
1-1, just because it's at Anfield.
Beth, it's a spring evening, bank holiday, under the lights at Anfield. Have you got any more positivity for us?
Yeah, I am going to be. I'm going to go 3-1 Liverpool. I think it's going to be a surprise, positive result to spice up everybody's Easter weekend.
Yeah, I hope everyone has a big Easter weekend. I'm going to go for a nice 4-0 Liverpool win. I think they're going to blow the wheels off the Arsenal title race and they're going to turn their season around and finish inside the top 4. And this will be the catalyst for that heading into the last month of this season. Being very optimistic, as I've said there. But, we'll wrap up the podcast there. A lot to catch up on. I hope you've enjoyed that, everyone. As I've said so many times this season, it's felt like a therapy session at times. We come into the start of the pod, get loads off our chest and work out why Liverpool have been so bad. And then come out at the end of it full of positivity, a resurrection of the spirits, you could say, on this Easter weekend. Well, listeners and viewers, we've got plenty of build-up and content around Sunday's visit of Arsenal to Anfield. So make sure you subscribe to us on whichever platform you get your podcasts from, our Blood Red YouTube channel, and make sure to keep up to date with the Echo LFC site and socials so you don't miss any of Gorsty, Theo, or Beth's brilliant work. But for now, thank you so much for joining us. We'll catch you again on Monday on the Blood Red podcast.